says this, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be what? Lifted up. In John 12:32, as for me, if I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. He said this to indicate what kind of death he was about to die. He is saying the way he's going to die is not by stoning, not getting stabbed with a sword or something like that. He was going to be lifted off from the earth, from the ground. Now, in Judaism, if someone was found guilty and condemned to be executed, what was their mode of execution? How'd they do it? What was their method? How did Stephen die? Stoning. They would stone someone. That was the preferred method, the biblical method for execution. How did the Romans execute someone? Crucifixion, hanging that person on a wooden cross, lifting them up from the earth. Sound kind of familiar? Why would the Jewish leaders, if having him dead is all that matters, why would the Jewish leaders want him to be executed by the Romans? It's because they wanted him to be executed by crucifixion and not by stoning. And why would they want him executed by crucifixion and not by stoning? It's because of what Deuteronomy says in Deuteronomy 21:23, where it says, anyone hung on a tree is under God's curse. They were not content with Jesus simply dying. They wanted him to be viewed as accursed. They wanted him to be debased. They wanted him to be defiled. They wanted him to be so rotten that no one would want to follow a cursed man. And so they went to Rome because they wanted him to die in that way. All of these warnings should have caused them to stop doing what they were doing. But the reason they did not stop what they were doing is because they had already made up their mind on what they were going to do. They had already decided that they wanted Jesus to die, and they wanted him to die in that way, and they ignored warning after warning after warning after warning. I had to look this up. I don't know this by personal experience. But did you know that on a carton or a pack of cigarettes is a warning label? Did you know that? They got a warning label, and it says something to the effect of, these can kill you. These are cancer sticks, right? That's what it says on the label. Do you know how long there has been a warning mandated by the government on packages of cigarettes? Do you know how long they have put warnings on there? No one knows. Do y'all know? I had to look it up, but I do know. Y'all want to know? How many of you think, people really got into health stuff in the 2000s, right? How many of you think it's been since 2000 that they put that on there? Raise your hand. Let's see. A couple of you. I don't know. There may be some. How about the 90s? Anybody think the 90s? Pre-90, that's pre-cell phones, man. We were Neanderthals back then, so... Nobody, 90s, 80s, for sure 80s. All right, there's a few in the 80s. 70s. All right, there's a bunch that say in the 70s. 60s. Who say the 60s? The only people raising their hand on the 60s are the ones that were there. All right, that's it. 1965 is when the government said, you got to put a warning on cigarettes that they are not good for your health. 1965. And I have not been in a store and observed this, but I have a feeling that this very rarely, if ever, has ever happened. They go in a convenience store. Hey, I would like a pack of fill in the blank. I don't even know what they are. Fill in the blank. And they grab one and they look it over. Oh, there's a warning on here. Bad for your health? Oh, better not do that. Here, take that back from me. You think that happens? No. When they walk up to buy a pack of cigarettes, they have already made up in their mind that they do not care what the warnings say. They're going to smoke it regardless. Here's your takeaway. Are you ready? Surrendering to our sin will cause us to ignore God's warnings. Surrendering to our sin will cause us to ignore God's warnings. Leave it up there a little bit longer. It's a lot of words. They're writing it down. Surrendering to our sin will cause us to ignore God's warnings. They had already surrendered to their sin. How do I know that? The Bible said in the book of John earlier, they were looking for ways to kill him. They had already determined they were going to kill Jesus. They had already made up their mind. They had already become enslaved to that sin. They had already chosen that sin over righteousness.